I'm here this afternoon having a conversation with Jeff Apperson, who is one of our former presidents of the NCBC. Jeff, it's very good to be with you, and thank you for setting aside this time because I know how busy you are. Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
If you would just please give a synopsis of your work in the bankruptcy court, the positions that you may have had before you became clerk.
And after too, or just
and
before?
After, sure.
Yeah, because it kind of leads up to some of the questions. But it's good to see you again. And were you historian when I was president, or were you on the board? What was your position?
I was on the board in 94, 95.
Okay, so you were just coming to the conferences with Judge Kelly.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know we had a conference in Utah, as I
yes.
recall. And we went balloon riding. I remember Judge Kelly went balloon riding.
Yes, I did not.
But
I was part of the ground crew.
Okay, a little bit of a lead up to my career as a bankruptcy clerk. I started out of law school, worked for a law firm for a short period of time in Birmingham, Alabama. Took the bar in Birmingham, in Montgomery. Left shortly after I passed the bar for Washington, and I just thought I wanted to work for an institution in Washington. But I actually left to Birmingham to work for John Glenn's campaign, who was the senator from Ohio, and he was born and raised in my home county in Zanesville, Ohio. And so I came up here to work for him, and he withdrew shortly thereafter. I think Walter Mondale was the nominee that year. So I started looking for a job. Had my bar license. The government was going through a recessionary period, and so I walked the streets for probably 4 or 5 weeks, and I had a friend who was a chief probation officer in Rhode Island. His name was Tom Muddiman, and he called Dwayne Lee and Pete McCabe, and they hired me part-time at the administrative office, the U.S. Courts and the Magistrate Judges Division. So I was there part-time, and they didn't have any full-time openings, and a position came open in what was then management review. And Debbie Kirk was the director, was the head of the office. Didn't know much about the courts at that time. And they gave me a job as a reviewer for the courts for compliance and efficiency out of law school. Luckily, I had some probably political skills at that time, but didn't know much about the business. In fact, the judges knew I didn't know much about the business, probably. But anyway, I learned, actually it was a learning opportunity for me. So I spent 3 years at the administrative office of the courts, basically studying the courts and working with the courts, and at times I investigated judges with Frank Zabak.
Yes.
And Frank Zabak became one of my best friends, and in fact, I think the reason I got the bankruptcy job in Louisville was that Judge G. William Brown was on the committee, the bankruptcy committee, and so I went to Louisville at a very young age, probably 3 years at the AO, out of law school, became clerk of the bankruptcy court in Louisville. And I think there were like 180 applicants or something like that. Wow. We didn't have that many applicants when I left the district court. So it was a good position because, well, I had a hard time at first learning the ropes. Judge Brown was a good mentor for me, although he was not the chief judge at that time. I worked for another chief judge, Dietz. So I worked as the bankruptcy clerk from 1985 to 1992, probably the end of the year 1992 before I became district clerk. I met a lot of great people. I served on the case management committee of the bankruptcy committee of the judicial conference with Maurice Sear, who was from New Orleans. He was chair of the committee. And I always remember traveling with Judge Brown and Maurice Sear, and also began working with Jesse Clark a lot from Houston, who passed away, and also Judge Kennedy from Memphis, who was one of my mentors. And we did a lot of reviews in courts. And during my term, I think it was partly because Judge Brown was on the bankruptcy committee that I was kind of tagged to be a president of NCBC because of the importance of the working relationship between the bankruptcy committee and the National Conference of Bankruptcy Clerks. So shortly, probably 2 years after I began my term as clerk, I became, I can't remember, I was on the board. I was on the board of the National Conference of Bankruptcy Clerks, and then I ran. I don't know if you still run for office, but
yes,
I ran against Paul Carney, who was the clerk in Northern California, and who was my boss at the Management Review Office of the Administrative Office, which was in Wayne Wolf. I always remember Wayne Wolf. Clerk in Alaska was one of my best friends. And that was during the time where we didn't have many people attending conferences because the courts could not subsidize attendance. So usually you're on your own dime. And I think when I went to the conference was in Orlando, Bob Wiley was the president. And I remember there were only about 40 people in attendance. And I think I was told by Wayne I won by 1 vote. And Wayne told me that he was the deciding vote, but he was from the same circuit as Paul Carney. So
that's right.
So anyway, there was a little bit to overcome there for Wayne, but he remains a good friend. And I know we're going to go into more questions here. So
right.
I will kind of stop there as to how I became president of NCBC and what I did before.
Okay.
And I can go into more in detail later.
Well, let me ask you this. When did you join NCBC, and why did you decide to join?
Yeah, I was always interested in working with associations. And well, at the time, it was also a learning experience for me and a networking opportunity. And NCBC does provide great networking opportunities. You meet a lot of people in a relaxed environment with good training agendas during the conference. And I'm generally, I would say I'm generally was an ambitious type. You know, I just wanted to always do anything and climb the ladder, so to speak. And so I probably went to NCBC knowing I'd probably run for president at some point, and I also wanted to do it. It's also a prestigious position in relation to the politics of the court. So the more positions you have, the more relationships you have, the more effective you are as a clerk of court. So it was a conduit for building relationships, I thought. And also I did really enjoy being a bankruptcy clerk. So funny story for the record. I didn't want to leave the bankruptcy clerk position. I had a great job. I had great judges, and it's a much more specialized, simple environment managing in bankruptcy. The law is a little more complex than I thought district court was, but it was a federal judge, Judge Johnstone, who was the chief judge of the district court. It was the day before the last day of applying for the district court position, was walking out the back door of the courthouse with me, and he said, "Are you applying?" And I said, "I don't think so." I said, "The pay is the same, and if I apply, the 2 former U.S. attorneys are also applying, and I didn't want them to be enemies." So I thought, "Judge, I think I'll just stay with bankruptcy and we'll still be friends." And he goes, "You're applying." And that was it. So I applied, and it was a good decision, but a sad decision. But those are some of the reasons I probably wanted to get involved with NCBC. And just, also the great thing about the National Association of Bankruptcy Clerks, as I recall, it's not just about the clerks, it's about the system. And so you also, it's really an important organization for the deputy clerks. And
yes.
So that's something we need to keep in mind. It gives them, I think being involved in an association is very meaningful to the deputy clerks. because it gives them a larger investment in the system and an opportunity to do something. Right. So we did a lot of great things. I testified in Congress.
I recall that, yes.
I testified at the before Hal Heflin and Charles Grassley on the bankruptcy reform legislation of 1991. And I remember, I think Judge Kelly might have been there. I know Pete McCabe was there. But that was an interesting time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had that opportunity. I was always up on the Hill as president. I was never bashful, so to speak.
And you became president
1990, I think.
After the deputy clerks were allowed as members. Because that was in 1980.
It was after.
7.
Yeah, it was after.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was always with the yeah. There were a lot more deputy clerks than clerks when I was probably. I don't remember how many clerks were involved, but I remember Mary Weibel was on my board, and I can't remember. Bob Wiley was the past president. Wayne Wolf was treasurer. Brenda Argo. Yeah. Now Brenda was a great friend, great clerk. Yeah. Brenda Argo was there. She didn't like it when I went to district court. I was called a few names after I went to district court. So, but I just want everybody to know it wasn't all my choice. So that's the background.
Now, did you serve as a board member before you became president?
Yeah, okay. I did.
And then you were vice president probably for a year?
Yeah, I was vice president during Bob Wiley's term.
Okay.
And I always remember when Bob swore me in, he said, "Be patient, Jeff." I remember I was always saying just. Bob was a great president. Bob was a great leader. Yeah. So we had a lot of good people involved. Brenda Argo was another one, great leader. Yeah.
Did you serve on any committee assignments while you were in the NCBC? I don't know that the committee structure was as strongly.
No, we were too small to have many committees. Okay. I don't recall at this time. Okay. You know, it's been quite a while now. It's been 25 years. So.
Hard to believe.
24 years.
Do you recall any of the issues that were being discussed and were being worked on during the time that you were active in the NCBC?
Yeah, the big issue for us was always consolidation. And so that was probably the big issue. I think was always maintaining our institutional integrity within the system to begin exploring automated applications. So we were always kind of in the vanguard. I always felt the bankruptcy clerks were always the more aggressive managers as far as change. The district was a little more laid back, probably because the judges were a little more conservative at the federal district level. So that was
a lot of the technological innovations that have come to the courts have always started in bankruptcy.
Yeah, Rich Heltzel and Barry Lander, and they were two of the leaders that I recall. Barry still today.
Barry still is.
Tell Barry I still think he's a leader.
He'll probably see the video. So just told him. And I don't think you've been an active member of NCBC since you left the presidency, because wasn't it shortly after that you went to the district court?
You're right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think the NCBC is a viable or representative of the interests of the bankruptcy community, and how do you think it can better serve the needs of the bankruptcy employees?
You know, I've seen a lot of good things out of bankruptcy. You know, it's honestly, the organization has grown beyond, as far as attendees at conferences and participation, beyond what I imagined during my term. So I think organizationally, I've seen a lot of improvement. As far as how they could, I think representatively, I know when I was president, I do remember that when it came to budget or participation at the AO, organizationally, I was very concerned about representing the interests of the organization. It is a pathway to being included in the governance conversations at the administrative office and the judicial conference. So those were two. That was important. And you know, we have a lot of people involved being involved at the conferences is also an opportunity to voice opinions regarding, pay and benefits was always a big issue for us. And I know the pay raise for the clerks, that was Bob Wiley's big, I think, issue. He and Mike Coons from Philadelphia. But getting through that pay raise for the clerks also helped with the pay raises for the deputy clerks, because once they raised the cap on the clerks, they started raising caps on other positions. So that was one I wasn't sure about. But we were always linked to the judges anyway. So that was one of the big issues, was pay and benefits. Yeah.
And I think you were one of the people within the NCBC that always maintained we should keep a very open and viable communication with the NCBJ as well.
Oh, that's right, NCBJ. I worked closely with NCBJ, and was the judge from Nashville was the president of NCBJ, Payne, Judge Payne.
Yes.
Judge Payne was president of NCBC when I was NCBJ when I was president of NCBC, and I remember they attended our conferences.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of the link to the judges, because the judges participated in our conferences, particularly Judge Kelly, who was probably the biggest patron of NCBC. He was the biggest supporter, and probably the most popular bankruptcy judge in the system, and famous and good. So I think Kelly, Brown, Payne were kind of the leaders, and Kennedy was always a leader. And then Frank Zabak and I, we worked really closely with the AO in the bankruptcy division. So it was a great opportunity. It gives you, the more you participate in associations and, build those relationships and get involved, you have a bigger voice in things. So, yeah, it's always good to get a bigger voice.
Absolutely.
Now, you always used to tell me what to do. I remember. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
You were never bashful with me.
No, I've never been bashful with anyone.
No, I was, but no, you were a great help when I was president.
Well,
I remember that.
Appreciate that.
I do remember that. You were big help, big supporter. I might have won the election because of you. You never know. I don't know if you were in Orlando or not.
Yes, I was.
Were you in Orlando?
Yeah.
Oh, then we won't talk anymore.
No.
Okay.
We won't do that. But you have a very distinctive difference, as opposed to the other NCBC presidents, in that you were both NCBC president, and then when you became clerk of the district court, you then went on to become FCCA president.
Am I the only one that did that?
To my knowledge, you are.
Yeah. I don't know of any other bankruptcy presidents that were...
No, I think you're unique in that. So, just discuss a little bit about how the two systems are different, the similarities between the two of them, and I think you probably have a unique perspective on the governance of both. And also, how do you think the two groups can work together going into the future for the good of the federal court system?
Yeah. Well, I was a district clerk for... See, I was bankruptcy clerk for 9 years and district clerk for 17 years. Your perspective changes.
Oh, yes.
From bankruptcy to district. I almost went to Court of Appeals, but not... I almost went to Court of Appeals, but didn't quite make it there. I came here instead. My perspective, bankruptcy is more unique operationally than district. It has similarities in organizationally. We have many of the same components in human resources, IT support, and space and facilities, that type of thing. But the difference is basically bankruptcy is smaller, and it's a little more connected. It's specialized. The bar and the judges are, fewer. So I felt like the relationships within bankruptcy were a little closer than the relationships in the district court. The politics were different, I thought, within the two organizations. I thought, the terms were, I think, the same. Was it 1 year or 2 years? 1 year? 2 years? Was it 1 year or 2?
2 years.
I can't remember.
Well, ours changed. Early on, they
it
were
might have been 1 year.
Terms.
I think I was president for 1 year, and I was president of SCCA for 2 years.
Yes.
I was more involved probably politically at NCBC, within the Bankruptcy Committee of the Judicial Conference and the National Conference of Bankruptcy Judges, and they're more focused on the agenda of the bankruptcy system. I was also probably the leading advocate of separation being important between the district court and the bankruptcy court. I was a big advocate of independence. And when you become part of the FCCA and the district court, you start looking at things a little differently. So the question is, how can we work together yet remain separate? And I think that's always been the key issue, is how can we work together but keep our separation?
Right.
And that's been where there's been some avoidance. And I know we've had joint conferences before.
Yes.
And I think we had one in Washington that was a joint conference between NCBC and FCCA.
Right. We also had one in Chicago.
Yeah, we did, in Chicago. And that's when I was president.
Yes.
And that's right, I was president of FCCA, and I think it was Barry, maybe president of, it was Barry or
was it Barry or Ken?
Might be Ken. Ken was president
I think it was Ken.
of bankruptcy. And I think you all had better attendance than we did that year. But that's because your bankruptcy was hosting it, I think. But no, we had, I think bankruptcy is more focused on the issues of bankruptcy, as far as the difference in the associations. Now, when I was president of FCCA, budget was the big issue. Budget wasn't so much the issue when I was president of NCBC. It was consolidation. So consolidation, case management on the NCBC side, and it was budget and protecting jobs during the downsizing, particularly 2004. 2004, I was president of FCCA. I did have I had really powerful judges on my court during my term as FCCA president. I had the chairman of the Budget Committee of the Judicial Conference on my court. I was on the Budget and Finance Committee of the Advisory Group to the Judicial Conference. I was on the Advisory Group. I was on the Financial Management Work Group. I was much more, and I had other judges on other committees. So I had more power because I had more connections when I was president of FCCA. And I do remember working the system to protect the employees. I did a much better job at protecting the interests of the employees when I was president of FCCA than I could as president of the bankruptcy clerks, because I had more access to the power.
Right. You bring up an interesting point, and consolidation or deconsolidation has always, ever since the bankruptcy code went into effect, been a question. And it's been a point of contention many times. Some of the people who have come into the system within the later years don't really know what the antecedents are to that. So since you have that perspective, can you talk just a little bit about why you think it's important that the bankruptcy courts and the district courts remain deconsolidated?
I think, well, the bankruptcy judges form bankruptcy courts. That's the key issue, is whether we have separate courts and separate clerks of court. The question is, if you're a judge, if you're a court, it's always better to have as much control as possible over the business that you're responsible for. The district courts are focused on basically the function and performance of the district court. Bankruptcy court would come second. Because of the separation, they're equally resourced, which was another issue. And they would not be equally resourced if they were combined. However, consolidation is primarily a matter of resources. The key issue for me in district court became, would we operate more effectively as a whole if we were consolidated? You have to look at it from a practical standpoint. The theory of independence still makes sense because you're still separate. But the practicalities of the budget environment are going to dictate the tension of the issue going forward. That's always going to be there. And I think Judge Kelly may have shared this, was that the Article 1 judges, the bankruptcy judges, should become Article 3. That's what we thought. And then maintain the specialization. We always thought that the power of the bankruptcy judges was always being questioned jurisdictionally. It still is being questioned jurisdictionally because of Marathon Oil. So we always thought that the answer was Article 3 in all accounts. So, but some judges resisted that because they wouldn't be appointed. The judges that were bankruptcy judges might not have the politics to get the Article 3. So you had the institutional resistance to, and I think there were senators that were in favor of the Article 3. So, but it just never was pushed. But I think that's ultimately the solution, is for the bankruptcy judges to obtain Article 3 status.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Well, as the NCBC goes forward, how do you think it can continue to serve the bankruptcy court system, particularly in the areas of its stated mission, which are leadership, advocacy, and education?
Well, I think first of all, participation among the clerks is very important. So you need the leadership. You do need the leadership at the clerk level. You always are going to need that. Have there ever been any presidents that weren't clerks? Remember?
No, there have not.
There have not. Well, I think FCCA's. We had one chief deputy as president of FCCA, who became a district clerk the year he was president, the San Diego clerk. But I think first you need the leadership from the clerks, and it was once an organization of just clerks. And I may have started when it was just an organization of just clerks. How did we change that? Did I change that? I don't remember how we changed that.
It was changed in 1987.
It was right when I was getting involved.
Yes, was the first year that deputy clerks were allowed to hold membership.
That was probably Heltzel then.
Yes, he was very instrumental.
Yeah, it might have been Richard. So
he and David Byrd was part
Delaware.
of that.
Yeah.
Probably Jerry Truitt as well.
Yeah, Jerry Truitt. Yeah. Boy, Jerry was a good clerk. Is he still there?
Yes.
Yeah. Jerry might still be there. He's the one still there. But as far as education, I think the conferences, based on my recollection, it was one of the only ways generally for deputy clerks to meet and participate in an educational agenda. To me, the education was not just about the agenda, it was the relationship building that NCBC facilitated. Don't let me say FCCA if I'm talking about NCBC. It's a little confusing. For both organizations, it's the network. I mean, a lot of people are out there trying to find answers, and the networking opportunity is an educational opportunity. I do think it's probably the most important reason to have the conferences. The education can be done remotely, but you don't build the relationships. So those friendships and relationships build stronger institutions.
And what about the other prong of their mission in advocacy?
Yeah, they're important advocates. I do recall we worked primarily through the judges. NCBJ is a very strong organization as an advocate. I always work pretty much hand in hand with NCBJ. And of course you have the bankruptcy committee. I think I did attend a few bankruptcy committee meetings with the judicial conference. But it's a pretty small power circle there. And the fact that the judges respect the mission and the membership of NCBC, I think, is critical in the judges representing our interests. There was a stronger connection there between the judges and the clerks organization at NCBC than at the district level. Yeah. So you have stronger judge-clerk partnerships because also there's an interest in having those partnerships in the bankruptcy area because bankruptcy courts have been on the defensive for so long, and it's kind of a, it's a way when you're under threat, like I felt, you're under threat of losing. The clerks would lose their job if there's consolidation. So our jobs were always threatened by the talk of consolidation. And I remember San Antonio being the clerk of the San Antonio District Court consolidated, and that was always a concern for us. I think Pennsylvania Eastern consolidated. They deconsolidated. They consolidated when I was there. There was a pattern of consolidation going on. And so that's why, that was the difference, was those relationships. We didn't have to worry about consolidation at the district court level.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, thanks for spending some time with me today. It's good to see you, and thanks for your
Yeah,
thoughts.
thank you. Say hello to all the clerks. I'll try to get back involved. I'm doing all the international relations now, so.
We'll always be happy to see you then.
Yeah, but I just wanted to tell you before I get off that I did transition from the judiciary and retired in 2010, the year you did, 10, end of 10, to manage international rule of law projects. So the experience of my work in the federal courts have allowed me to convey that experience to other judiciaries that are developing internationally. Because as you know, in the last 30 years, the federal judiciary and the clerk's offices have transformed.
Oh, yes.
So that same transformation that we went through over the last 30 years, 35 years, is now just beginning in most countries developmentally in the world. So we're doing a lot of the work that we did over the last 30 years in the United States in other countries. So I haven't, actually my job now is harder than ever. It's actually really hard because I have 25 countries, so that I'm kind of overseeing some of the management of courts. So very interesting.
Good to know that your background serves you well.
Yeah, it helped me a lot. So